Today we're going to be working on a light box for you guys. It's a project that technically you can do by hand if you have hand tools. If you got just a regular hand saw, you should be just fine. I'm cheating. I'm using everything I've got in my garage just because it's easier that way. So if you do have power tools at home, ask mom and dad to help you, but they could help you do this too. So a light box is not the same thing as a shadow box. We'll be making a shadow box in the next video. This is just going to be a light box. It's basically for tracing. You're going to need a piece of glass or a piece of plastic. If you have a piece of see-through plastic, that works too. This is from the dollar store in town, so it costs $1. And all you need is the glass piece for this. So the bigger the piece of glass, the easier this is going to be for tracing. However, it's also the more wood you're going to need. So this is what you're looking for. Don't break it. This can all just go in the garbage. So you're also going to need some scrap wood. So I have a whole bunch of wood here from projects I've been doing since this whole quarantine thing started. You just have to have them be bigger than 8 by 10 because that's the piece that I'm using for my glass. If your glass is bigger or smaller, then obviously you can use more or less wood. So I'm going to get rid of this and we'll show you the next step. Alright, so you just want to find some pieces of wood that are halfway decent. This one's a little bit darker than the others because it comes from a different part of my house, so I'm not going to use that one. That one's probably okay. Put that in a good pile. This one's pretty roughed up in some spots. This side was okay though, so you could still use this and just hide this on the inside because you're not going to see the inside of this project. So that one's good on both sides. That one's good on, well, except for right there, but mostly good. And that one is mostly good. So we'll see if I can't, this one's actually good on both sides. If I can get 2 pieces out of that, that would be great. So, okay, you're working with, in my instance, an 8 by 10 piece of glass. So what you want to do is make a box that's going to fit around 8 by 10. You could do that pretty easily by putting together your wood just like this, 90 degrees, and you would have to measure this to be whatever the thickness of this is more than 8 by 10. So let's assume that you're doing 10 across. You have to add, this is 3/4 of an inch, so you're going to have 3/4 on this side, 3/4 on this side, 10 inches in between. So it's 10 plus 3/4, and then times 2. I'm doing this in my driveway because it's really nice out. So I haven't been out of the house since spring break started. That's not true. I went to Walmart and I went to Menards once. But otherwise I've pretty much been home and inside. We had a whole bunch of flooding the other day. We've had a lot of windy storms. It hasn't been super great. So today is beautiful. We have 10 inches plus 1.5 inches. So we're looking at 11.5, and then like I said, just a little bit extra from that. So 11.5 inches is what I'm looking at here. This is what this tool is helpful for. I'll do it so you guys can see hopefully, but it just helps you draw a line straight across so that you know that everything's actually straight. The reason you want to make sure everything is straight is because you could have a table saw or something like I do here, and you assume that this is straight, but there's a little bit of give in here. You can see it wiggles back and forth. So I actually don't usually use that too often, but okay. If you haven't used a table saw before, you probably shouldn't. Probably ask mom and dad, but if they're helping you, you unscrew this part. This lets you cut at different angles by pulling in and out of the pin here. So I want it to be at 0 degrees, which means that it's going to be, hopefully, in theory, perpendicular to what I just drew. Clear your area so you don't end up with things flying all over. And then when you have this line, you're wanting to cut on the outside of this line because you have to take into account the thickness of this blade. If you just cut right on this line, you're actually losing a little bit of this piece. So, something like that. Oh, helps to plug everything in. 1 second. And we're back. That thing to stop spinning so you can hear me. So if you can see this, hopefully you see there's still a little bit of a black line up here. That's how I know that I cut correctly, whereas on this piece there is no black line, and that's because of the width of the blade there. So we need 2 of these. So I'm going to use the one that I just cut as kind of a stencil or a template. Okay, so I have my 2 pieces here. These are my 10s plus 1.5 inches. So 11.5. Now you need to measure the pieces that are going to go in between here. So we have an 8 by 10. We had to account for the inner width of our box for the 10s, but with the 8s, we actually only want them to be 8 and just a little bit extra, so 8 and like a dot, kind of like we did 11.5 plus a dot. So hopefully that makes sense. You're only adding an extra 1.5 inches to one side. This is left over from another project, so I'm just going to cut this part off, and I'm going to go an 8 section and an 8 section. Okay, so I'm just going to fast forward through all of this. Basic setup for your light box. If you measure this, it should be 10 inches this way. If I actually line this up the right way, we are at 10 inches, and it should be 8 this way. So that is your 8 by 10. And then all you do is put nails on either side, and then you'd move on to the next step. Now, I am going to show you, if you want to be a little bit fancier, you could cut these corners at an angle. So we're going to do that part next. It's not necessary. The other one will work just fine. This just looks a little bit neater. So we're going to be cutting this at an angle here. So what you're going to do is, let's see if I can hold this at an angle that you guys can see. Maybe I'll have to come work on the other side of the camera here so you can see what I'm talking about. What we're going to be doing is cutting this at an angle. Whoops, you'll notice mine is broken here. And that angle is going to be 45 degrees, which is half of 90, or half of an L. So we're looking at something just like that. And then on the other side, you're going to have to do the same thing, but what you need to pay attention to is if this is pointing towards the inside part here, this side also needs to be pointing towards the inside part here. So, for example, you'd flip this around, line it up with the corner here, just like that. I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but there is 1 and there is 2, and you're gonna have to do that on both of these. So let's do that real quick. Oops. Now, this is where having a table saw comes in handy. You could technically saw this by hand, but it's going to be a lot of extra work. I don't recommend it. If you do have a table saw, though, or if, you know, Dad has other power tools that you can cut this with, or your mom or whoever's helping you, grandpa or grandma or somebody, then go ahead and do this. But otherwise, I would leave it as is, okay? So what you can do is adjust your table saw so that it can cut exactly the angle that you want. So this has a switch here, and you can move this up to 90 degrees, or sorry, 45 degrees. It was at 90. Here's 45, and what you're gonna do is run this through, and you want it to be at just that bottom corner. So hopefully you guys can see that, but I'm lining this up with the end of my saw here. Don't get too close in case you accidentally hit the power button. We don't want accidents. Alright, for this next part, remember when I said you didn't need to do an extra 1.5 inches on your 8-inch pieces? That's true if you're doing the basic one, which is what I assume most of you would end up doing if you're going to do this. However, if you are going to be doing this fancier cut like this, then you do want to have an extra 1.5 inches plus a tiny bit added to your 8 inchers. So these ones are 8. 8 is the easy one. 9.5 is the slightly more complicated one that you need better tools for. Alright, so we're going to put these 8s away, and we're going to go with our 9.5s. Now, I'm just going to fast forward through this whole part because it's the exact same thing as what we did here. You could use screws, you could use, you could use like tape and some hot glue if you've got it. So you don't need all the tools that I'm using if you don't have them. It is a pretty simple project. So, in fact, technically, if you wanted to, you could just make this out of cardboard. It just won't last as long. So, okay, so we've got our 10s and our 8s, which are actually 11.5s and 9.5s. Now we need to put them together. Safety first. Get whoever's helping you to either do it for you or watch. Okay? I realize that this is an art project that is meant to have adult supervision, and you might say, well, why is it okay for my parents to help me with this project and not with our other projects? Like I said before, these are weird times for everybody, and I feel like it's important that you're spending time with family and maybe doing things that we don't get a chance to do in school. So that's the reason for this project. It's also going to lead into, this light box is going to be turned into a shadow box, like I said, for our March Madness winner, and that'll be in the next video. Okay, well, let's put this together. without nailing our fingers. So, by the way, this is unplugged. There's the switch. You don't want to have any power going to this while you're doing this, just in case. And this is the one time that I actually do like to use this thing, is just to help hold everything together. So if we are doing this correctly, we're going to line this all up ahead of time, just to make sure that our measurements are correct before we put a bunch of nails in here, and then we're not able to undo it without destroying everything. So we're looking at the inside gap should be 8, and it is 8 and a little bit, which is perfect. That's what we wanted. It's going to make life easier on us. And this is 10 almost exactly, which might give us a little bit of trouble because it doesn't have that little extra. Okay, so let's put this together. Now, we need to cut a little trim or border for the inside of this, and that's to hold the glass in place. So you're going to need more pieces of wood. Assuming that I measured this correctly, 8, we should be able to use those 8 pieces that I had cut before. So see how that fits in there? And there's a little extra gap right there. That's exactly what we want. Okay, so I'm going to cut the 8s. And as far as what size, I just want it to be consistent. So this is 1/2 inch, and the reason I know it's 1/2 inch is because there is a little measurement right here. So when you move this, you know how far it is. The other thing you can do is just use your ruler or your tape measure, 1/2 inch. Okay, need to plug this back in. I'm just going to use a piece of scrap wood that I have sitting on the ground over there. Just something so that you can run this through and not get your fingers caught in there. Okay, start it away from the blade so it doesn't kick up. Here is where your math gets a little bit trickier. You have an 8 here and an 8 here. This one is still a little bit small, but that's okay. So here's where your math gets a little bit tricky. This is 8, this is 8. You would think that this is 10 and this is 10, but it's not, because you have to take into account the 2 boards that you just put here. So don't just go cutting your pieces all ahead of time. It's best to assemble it as you go. We are looking at just over 8 3/4 on that side, and 8 3/4 on that side. So my 8-inch board that I threw on the ground there isn't going to work. So what I need to do is cut 8 and 3/4. So I think what I'm going to do is cut these pieces out first, and then I'll trim them down to size. What we want to do is put these in like this. However, you want them to be sticking out just a little bit, or I like mine to be sticking out for kind of like a frame around your project. You don't have to do it this way. This is just for the student prizes that I make. So see how it's rising up just a little bit. Alright, let's do that all the way around. That's the basics of it. So now comes the test for whether or not we measured correctly with the glass and everything. So let's get a different view and we'll see. Okay, so here's our piece of glass. You want to make sure it fits both ways. If it's that way, it's that way. So in theory, you did okay. Reach up from underneath so it doesn't come crashing down. And that is a pretty tight fit. Man, I'm glad that worked out. I'd have looked quite the fool, wouldn't I? Okay, so I've had this plugged in for a little bit. What you want to do is use some glue in each corner to get it kind of locked into place. Now after I do these corners, we're going to do the whole thing. And the reason for that is because if you're using this as a shadow box, which is what this is going to become, it's not such a big deal. But if you're using this for a light box, which is for tracing, then it is a big deal because you're going to end up pushing down on this glass. You got hot glue string. You're going to be pushing down on the glass from the other side, and you don't want this to fall out while you're working on it, because it could crack and you could get cut. So again, safety first. Okay, and there you go. That is now where you can put a picture on here. You can put a piece of paper over the top and you can trace it. However, it works best, you could hold it up to like a window or something. It works best though if you have a light behind it. So I have, more expensive, you can get like color changing LEDs. Those look kind of cool if you're using this as like a night light with a shadow box. But for tracing, you just want a bright light. Now, I like these ones from Walmart. They're like $3 or $4. They come with some pretty not great Velcro on here, but what I do is when I make this into a shadow box, I need to be able to get inside here to put the shadow of the papers in here that makes the shadows. At the end of that, I put a board that goes from right here to right here, and I take this and I flip it over on the inside like this. I'm not going to do that for this project because I need to get in here still, but the last step would be to cut out a piece of wood and nail it into here, nail it into here, careful not to break your glass, and take off this tape, and you can stick this on that board. Okay, we need to go find someplace dark so I can show you how this works. This is what it looks like in the darkest spot that I could find. Hopefully you can see my hand here. It's not focusing very well because it's so dark there's not a lot to focus on. But when you flip the switch underneath, then wait for it to focus, and there you go. And this is 2 pieces of paper here. So this is the one that you would draw on. That's the one that you would trace. You set it on top, and it's just like looking out of a window and holding your paper on a window, only this is much easier to trace with. Let's show you what it looks like in daylight too, because part of the reason for this is to not have to sit in a dark room while you are tracing something. This is just a corner of a room in my house with the light from the windows shining in. It's still a little bit dark, but it's not as dark as the darker room that you were in before. And I just want you to see, again, there's the paper underneath. It doesn't have to be something you've already drawn. You could take like a comic or something like that, or find a picture off of the internet that is copyright free, and then you can trace it, change it, make it your own. Here's what that looks like then. So there you go. That is your light box. Stay tuned for the next one, and we'll show you how to make this into a shadow box instead.